Without any further ado, I'm going to bring my brother Ashton Minor on the screen. Ashton Minor is the founder and executive program director of Jacob's Puzzle Foundation, where he's dedicated to advocating for Black students with disabilities. He has a secondary special education teacher where he empowers students through mentorship, IEP advocacy, and post-secondary preparation, where he works to ensure equitable access to education and career opportunities. What's up, brother? How you doing, man?
Man, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good. It's Friday Eve, the last Thursday of Black History Month, so we're gonna celebrate real heavy this weekend. So I'm actually really happy and really excited. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Also, man. I know when we first connected, we were in off season. This is like the third or fourth week of season 5, man. And I apologize because typically I'm on top of the emails and everything. But man, you caught me during the off season. I be really trying to unplug, right? But I appreciate your persistence, man. And I love people who love what they do. But, I would like to kind of get started with you. And, I did an intro, but let us know a little something about you, what you do, what you're most proud of, and share with us your origin story, if you would.
So what? That's a loaded question because a lot has gotten me to this point. Truth be told, I was actually speaking to a student today about this actually. I wanted to be a teacher when I was in third grade. And I was blessed enough to go to a all-Black charter school in Chicago. Let me start over. I'm born and raised in Chicago, from the South Side of Chicago, born and raised. Then I went to New York, where I went to school. Then I went to Howard in DC, and now I'm in Philadelphia. But when I was at school, my K through 8 school, I was at an all-Black charter school, and I was blessed enough to have Black teachers. And that's a rarity nowadays, even then, but I was blessed to have pretty much an entire Black staff, and they were phenomenal. And I knew I was to be a teacher then, but one thing that kept me out of education was grading. Grading is like my Achilles heel. But what inspired me to stay in it is really just seeing my students achieve and just really seeing them really try to even attempt a hard problem and attempting to fail. And I say attempting to fail because when you fail, you can always try again. And that's how you know you're being successful versus just failing and not doing anything else. But yeah, that's what kind of got me into education. That's what started me there. When I was in undergrad at St. John's University in New York, I majored in Asian studies because at the time I went to a private school in the northern side of Chicago, northern suburbs, and I was studying Chinese at the time because that was in the Bush administration. I was like, I'm going to actually learn about the culture we're partnering with, learn about the culture that is funding us for the most part. So let me actually learn something about them. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. That's not really what I want to do. I want to actually engage in my own culture, engage in myself. And it just brought me to a place where I was like, it's something more out there. It's something greater. And what inspired me to start Jacob's Puzzle was actually when I was my first education job in DC. I was started as an educational aide, working with like the school I was working at was 100% special education, but I was working with the workforce development program, which is a program dedicated to students that are 18 to 23, 18 to 22 that are classified as autistic or some other disability, but they have to be autistic, but they get on-site training, whether that be in hospitality, whether that be in horticulture, whether that be in healthcare. And when I was working with them, I was like, yeah, no, this is what I want to do because our students that look like me, they need to see people that look like them achieve more too. Like there's much more to success versus just academics. Success for a student is about their social awareness. It's about their cognitive load. It's about their just growth as a student and just interacting with people, social cues, just really involving themselves in the whole thing. So that's kind of what brought me to the point of just wanting to work with students with disabilities. And furthering that, I'll end on this. I was undiagnosed when I was growing up. When I was in that same K through 8 school, I was in, I think, 5th grade, which is a very heavy testing grade. And I took the Illinois State assessment and I scored in the 98th percentile because I was like really trying to take tests. I was really involved. I really loved school and I was part of a gifted and talented summer program. So after that, I was able to really get involved and really see like the immersion process of actually being able to like learn through experiences, learn through activities, learn through more than just reading a book and regurgitating what someone taught you. And I was undiagnosed. And then it came to a point where I was in college where I was like, Something might be a little off. And, you're scrolling through social media, you kind of see like, oh, you have ADHD when this happens, you have autism when this happens, you have this and this and this. And I was like, maybe I have ADHD. I'm not too sure. So it took me a while to actually find a way to get diagnosed as an adult. And when I got diagnosed as an adult, um, the person that did my testing, he said, when you get older, you learn to mask differently because you learn how to cope with things differently. You learn how to grow through it. You learn different strategies to help yourself go through it. And I said, yeah, you know what? You're right. I did learn a lot about me through my life and through my own experience of just growing. So when I started in education once again, I said to myself, let me actually show my students that no, you can be neurodivergent as well and still achieve more. And that's what I really wanted to do and impart with my students.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, what an awesome story, Um, similar to you, I know what it means to be in college and you'd be like, what did you say? Something was off.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was after I got to the end of last semester and I took that same class like 3 or 4 times and I couldn't understand what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But it was at that moment I began to realize something was going on. Now, as you stepped into education and special education, would you consider yourself a career changer? And if so, what led to that?
I am certainly a career changer. And I acknowledge that for just myself, mainly because, again, when I was in college, I majored in Asian studies. So I wanted to travel the world, see the world, and do all those things. I consider myself a career changer because I didn't start in college as a School of Ed student. I didn't start in school and just try to go down the education path. I really avoided my calling at all costs because I did not want to go back to school. I did not want to do any grading. Like, I'm against grading. Grading is important, but I'm against grading. Teachers have a lot on their plate already, and grading 500 papers a day is just overwhelming sometimes. But I consider myself a career changer because I was in hospitality and I was working in retail at the time. And a mentor of mine that worked with the National Urban League, he suggested, Ashton, you would actually be a really good teacher. You'd be a really good educator. You should look into this organization that's hiring right now. And when I looked into it, I said, yeah, I'm going to apply. So when I applied, it was literally the middle of the school year, February, and I was able to be hired as an assistant for the leadership team. And I was really enjoying that experience. And that's where I was like, I really want to get involved with my students. So I advocated for myself to have an advisory, have a class, and my principal allowed me to have an advisory of freshmen and juniors, allowed me to lead a choice time. So I led a choice time called Blacks in Media. I led a choice time with the yearbook. Then I led a group after school with the behavior specialist and the college career counselor. And we created our own little program with our students. So we still follow up with our students today, here and there. You know how these kids are. Once you get out of school, it's like, oh, my teachers, why are they texting me? Or why should I hit them up? But, when you have the students that miss you, they will text you and say, hey, Mr. M, how you doing? What's going on? And those are students that really that keep me in it. But when I was in it, when I started rather, some challenges that I faced was because I didn't have the traditional route of doing Teach for America, City, or any type of preparation program. I felt this imposter syndrome, like I did not belong. Because when you go to certain spaces and when you're in certain environments where you have people that are your age or older and they are principals, they're assistant principals, they're CEOs, they're some type of level of education because they started so early, you kind of feel as if you're inadequate in these spaces. You feel as if you don't have that same type of capabilities to lead a class, lead an organization, or even build that connection with your students. However, I'm grateful that I was actually able to find support through an organization called Profound Gentlemen, which is an organization dedicated to the recruitment and retention of Black males in education. And through that organization, that is what literally kept me in education. It was during the time of COVID as well that everything changed. So I was working as an admin assistant in ed before COVID. Then I did nonprofit support through higher ed. And then it was in COVID happened. That's where I was in that whole transition period of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, how I could support. And that's why I get back into education with the educational aid experience. And I was like, Yeah, profound gentlemen, a group that supports Black males, and you don't see too many of us, right? We account for 1.2% of Black men. We account for 1.2% of Black of educators in the system altogether, but as SPED, I'm 7.7% of that 1.2% in SPED in education. So I'm a part of a tinier demographic altogether. So for me, I was like, let me actually find an organization and really step out of my comfort zone. And that's hard for me to do sometimes because being neurodivergent, I get overwhelmed sometimes with social anxiety and just really trying to step out of my comfort zone and really share my story. And I didn't realize how much of a story other people have with me. And it's just a feeling the imposter syndrome, not feeling adequate, not finding that support group. But I was blessed enough that Profound Gender got me involved in education, kept me in the classroom through SEL, professional development, and going to those conferences that they were hosting that led me to other conferences, that led me to other organizations, that led me to other communities of Black educators all around. And it's just been an amazing experience. And I'm grateful also that that led me to Howard's special education program, which is how I was able to achieve my master's. And they exposed me to the Council for Exceptional Children, which is very much so an advocate for special ed for all across the nation. But I'm grateful that I was exposed to these opportunities because I can see the work that I'm doing. I can see the impact I'm having on my students in and out of the classroom. And I can see that just my presence in the classroom, in the field of education, has a lasting effect that I didn't realize that as a child, I was like, why do I have a Black male teacher as my third grade teacher? Now, looking back, I'm like, yo, that man is why I am in education, because representation matters so many ways. I had a Black male teacher when I was in third grade, fifth grade, and third, fifth, sixth, and seventh grade. It was rotated because they had their specialties like humanities and things like that. But just seeing them in those communities, I didn't realize that we are important. We do matter. And something I had to recognize is that I love all people, and white women dominate the field. They dominate the field. And that's something we have to acknowledge. But you can still have an impact on your students regardless of who's in the field with you. It's better to not exclude them, but to really partner with them and accept, like, no, you're going to be here. So let's actually bring you to that experience. Let me show you what my experience is like with my students. Let me actually bring you to all of this so you can try to familiarize yourself. So that way you aren't just saying that my students are bad. No, they're not bad. They need some love, extra love and support.
Awesome, awesome. What a great story, because as you begin to take your journey, I had a few questions and you just kind of hit all of the points, right? You begin to talk about how you built community and you were able to find that safe, I call it the safe place, because if we get out here in the world, it's crazy, right? But then as you begin to come full circle, I give my people from Chicago a hard time, because Chicago, they were like, hey, we Chicago, we awesome. We got 10 Black teachers. We don't know what's wrong with y'all, right? But then when you get out into the rest of the world, you be like, you lucky if you find one. And when I tell people, Atlanta's like that too, right? They think the rest of the world is like Atlanta, right? Barbershops open at 10 p.m. on Sunday night, but they don't realize the rest of the world is not like that. But I love your story because you begin to kind of take your journey and you went to that vulnerable place, that place where you were the minority. You were the person that, and I didn't realize this until I saw my son. I was like, why are educators so into these degrees and all this stuff? And I didn't realize it was like a mini corporate America where everybody be signifying, right? Everybody politicking. I'm like, what in the world? They're like, you ain't nobody if you ain't got no PhD, no master degree. So as I hear your story, I'm like, oh, and then he showed up. He said, let me go to Howard, right? The Mecca. And let me go and get this master's degree. And let me get this organization, right? What's the name of the organization, Jay? The gentleman's, what?
The Jacobs Puzzles Foundation.
The Jacobs Puzzle. And then you found your community at the other gentleman's organization. What was that?
Profound Gentlemen, yep.
Yeah. And I love it. I love it. I love it. I begin to talk and tell people what it means to be safe out here. Sometimes we can find safety in education places. Sometimes we can find safety, but if you can find community, tell me this, you mentioned it briefly. Do you believe, how does a lack of Black male educators and culturally competent teaching impact our students, especially the ones with disabilities?
That is also a heavy topic, especially considering what is currently happening in our policy as we speak, currently in legislation. However, it impacts them because if they don't see somebody that looks like them, that's willing to be vulnerable and show them who they are, immediately they start to push people off. And it wasn't until I worked with the elementary school I was working with in DC that I call her my teacher mom. She told me that students know who's for them and who's not. They know who's authentic and they know who's not. And you could tell who's authentic because they'll gravitate to you regardless of what's happening. And just again, like I said before, the fact that Black male educators are only represented in 1.2% of the education workforce altogether. And me being 7.7% of that is even crazier to me because that's an even smaller amount in SPED. And a lot of our students that are boys and girls, they're misdiagnosed in SPED just because of behavior issues in first, second, and third grade. When in fact, those students just need that redirection. They just need that extra support because they may not get that at home because mom is at work for 3 hours longer than she needs to. And grandma can only take care of so much at the time. And it's hard for our students to associate the fact that I'm there for you and I'm not there to harm you. I'm here to help you. And I think that at the secondary level, it's even more crucial that there are even more Black males in the classroom because that's when they're really trying to really define themselves. Like, yes, high schools definitely start to feel themselves. That's across the board. That's just high school altogether. But when it comes to Black and brown boys and girls, when they don't have teachers that really can recognize and really relate to them and tell them, no, I did not have an IEP when I was in school, but I should have. When I tell my students my story, they're like, oh, word? I'm like, yeah, I did. I actually had, when I went to the private school in the northern suburbs of Chicago, I was pulled out of classes. I was put out of my English class and history class to work with a reading specialist. I didn't know that at the time. At the time, I was just saying to myself, why is this lady pulling out of my class? Why is this lady taking me from my friends? So now I feel like I'm being isolated from being with my friends, learning the same thing that they're learning. But the read specialist was really just trying to pull me out to get me to understand the content that I needed because my mother, or I'm not going to say her, but I was not aware that I had a disability at all. I didn't realize how trauma impacts ADHD. I didn't know how trauma impacts neurodivergence altogether. I didn't realize how much brain trauma impacts all of that when you're falling downstairs or, things hit your head or are you in car accidents, things happen. And that does affect the learning capacity of a student. And when I tell my students that I too feel isolated when I'm pulled out for social services, I too feel isolated, it makes a difference when they know that they weren't alone and they aren't alone. And students love when they are able to see the authentic you versus the one that they think is just this one perfect robotic person. They think I live in a school, and I definitely don't. They think teachers live in a school. And when it comes to students with disabilities, they're easily told no. They're told no all the time. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. You need a bathroom? No, you can't do that. And so they start to erupt emotionally and they can't handle or regulate themselves. So for me, I really try to work with my students and say, okay, do you need the bathroom or do you need a break? There's a difference between going to the bathroom for a moment versus a break. If you need a break, I give you that. I have fidgets. What do you need? How can I help you? Help me help you. Because I don't want you to go into the world or graduate to feel as if I don't, or you are, what's the word I'm looking for? You're helpless because you're not. You have a voice. You speak up when you're hungry. You speak up when you want something. So speak up when you say you need the accommodations that I need. Actually, Mr. Miner, I need to actually have a smaller group setting. Can I actually step into the hallway to do this assessment? Can I actually talk to you really quick? Sure. I could sit you aside and talk to you about this. Let me set this class up. Or we tell students, hey, so when Mr. Miner is speaking really, 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 really fast in the morning is because either my medication just kicked in, that coffee just kicked in, or it could be both. So at the same time, so just being vulnerable with them and saying, actually, Mr. Miner, go take a little break. I need to regulate myself, take that little 10-second cool down. And you start to slow down. So then I actually had a student who came up to me one day in class. He's like, yo, Mr. Miner, you know how you told us how you take a breather and you need to slow down because you're just speaking really excited? I do that too. And I said, and in that moment, that's when I realized when you're authentic and you're vulnerable, they'll feel that and they'll sense it. And then they'll start mimicking you because kids, or rather not kids, children and students of life are always watching what you do and watching how you move and watching how you communicate, whether it be verbally or body language, verbally or non-verbally, excuse me. They're watching you and what you do and how you move and how you treat others. So if you treat them with respect, they'll give you that respect. Again, teenagers will try you, regardless of if they're your student or not. But I love my baby. So when I'm actually able to tell them, like, I see you, I see your growth. I'm glad that you stopped smoking. I'm glad that you did this. But now that you stopped doing this, what can we do to keep you on this path to get you to college? How can we get you on this path to really figure out, I don't need any drug. I don't need anything. I want to actually better myself and be able to perform where people say I can't. And so that's where I step in. I'm saying, actually, you're better than that. Let's work together. Let's do this. Let's do that. So speaking up for themselves, how I got here. So,
Thanks for sharing that part of your story, because it definitely gives me like a day in the life, a chance to kind of step into your shoes, right? And for people who are listening, if you don't realize how big of a deal this representation is, how big of a deal it is for these children to be seen, right? I actually got hip, and I'm going to talk to Shirley about it shortly. This Dr. Benita Love, I'm loving this phrase because I've seen it happen to my own son in third grade. And Dr. Benita Love was saying, hey, it's around the third grade where our kids experience the spiritual murdering of our children. And if you look at the political climate where, 90% of 2% of sisters voted one way and the other women voted another way, I read somewhere they say, they help them guys whenever they get in trouble. Yeah. So then you'd be thinking like, wait a minute, them people who voted that way are the same ones that are spiritually murdering our kids? Wait a minute, let's go back in history. When school was desegregated, wait a minute, what happened to all those black teachers? Where did they go? How did we get all of these white women teachers? Where did they come from? What happened to the black teachers? By design, they say. So thank you for showing us what it looks like. And because as a parent, you send your child off to this building and you have no idea what's going on. So kudos to a person like you who begins to make sure that these children are seen and made to feel human as compared to spiritually murdered. Let's talk about your organization, Jacob's Puzzle Foundation. I love that term. What systematic challenges do you see in special education, and how is your foundation, Jacob's Puzzle, working to address it?
Thank you for that question. And I want to kind of go back to what you just said before about the spiritual murdering part of our students. And I want to go back to that only because that's actually a systemic challenge, right? Is that when you go into public schools or charter schools or even private schools, a lot of our students don't feel seen. They don't feel heard. They feel as if they have no voice. So when they start to act out in certain ways, other teachers aren't able to really regulate them, or they'll just say, he acts good in your class, he doesn't act like that in my class, when in fact, that's because I'm able to talk to them or pull them aside and say, yo, step into my office real quick. Well, my office is really just my desk in the back of the classroom. Or just, we'll talk outside really quick. Let me just help you through this process. And I think that really that is a systemic challenge because it embeds a lack of support that our students need. Our students need wraparound services all around, especially SPED students. And when I say wraparound, I mean not just behavior supports, not just the formative assessment, not just the IEP or 504, but I'm thinking like literally support through all of the entire process. They need mentorships. They need students. They need to see people that look like them. They need to see people that understand them. Or you'll have a student that will, you have a restorative conversation with the entire class and they feel isolated because something is triggering them from home that they're trying to deal with and trying to process. So they'll feel as if you're not speaking or teaching a lesson. They'll feel like, I don't need this right now, so I'm going to walk to the classroom. And then they come talk to you and say, yo, Mr. Minor, you don't have to talk to me anymore. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. But, I still love you, but I feel like we got beef now. And then 3 days later, like literally the next day that comes to your class, they'll sit, they'll do work. Then the second day they'll come and sit in class and they'll actually try to engage again. And the third day you say, yo, Mr. Minor, I really don't have beef with you, but I really felt the way because I was just going through a lot at home. And, I just feel like I didn't feel like I was being heard in that time because, again, I have a lot going on at home. And that conversation didn't really apply to me because I was trying to help out. And when they feel seen, they're able to communicate and articulate things better because they're giving that space and autonomy to feel like an individual and not an adult, but they feel as if they're a person and not just a student ID number who's just a data point for a school to get more money and funding. that won't go to those services that they do need. And again, that goes back to the systemic challenge, because I'm thinking about resources. I'm thinking about educational aid. I'm thinking about teacher prep programming. I'm thinking about the students and teachers that want to go into SPED, but when they hear SPED, they're just thinking about the severe and profound students. They're thinking about autistic students. They're thinking about, colloquially, the short bus kids. And I get offended by that, because you could be SPED and not be on the short bus at all. SPED is encompassing of also gifted and talented. You can be super smart and you're definitely SPED, because again, that's special ed. We have to create a program specifically for you to grow academically. So that way you can be that 13-year-old that graduates with a college slow down. You can be that 13-year-old student that graduates college with a degree. I forgot the young lady's name, but it's a young Black girl that just graduated as the first Black girl at, like, I think she's like 13 or 15, I think from MIT or something like that. That's a special ed student. But we don't think about her as SPED, because when you think of SPED, you think of people who are academically low. And that is a thing, but sometimes your behaviors, your emotions really dictate how you feel and how you move in the classroom. So if you don't remove those blocks in the classroom, or you don't provide the services to remove those blocks, those students will always feel as if, I'm never going to be seen. I'm never going to be heard. I'm never a part of the system. I'm just here to get my degree and go, or my diploma and go. So how Jacob's puzzle likes to address it is bridging that gap between what the school's red tape can't do and what I can do on my own. I can only do so much as one individual, but if I'm able to build that community of people who want to actually grow with each other, I'm going to grow this way. I'm going to go this way. It takes a village to raise a child. It's not just one person. So for me, Jacob's Puzzle is looking to build a village of people who want to continue the work in SPED, not just in SPED, but in education altogether, because our students are facing a crisis right now. COVID only amplified the problem. It didn't mute it. It only amplified it in a way that we were like, oh, wow, our students really can't read. You can have a 12th grade student that is reading on the first grade level, and then you start to question, how did you get to high school and you read on the first grade level? And that's not just in SPED, that's general ed too. So what Jacob's Puzzle likes to do, we like to provide 6th through 12th grade students intervention program through project-based learning based on their interests. So we look at their IEP goals, we look at their 504 plans, we look at what Common Core standard we can apply to whatever project they're working on, and actually build out a program that they actually were interested in. For me, I didn't like reading, but it took me to be forced to clean my closet, because, as a child, no boy ever likes to clean their room. They throw everything in the closet, right? So I had the first Harry Potter book came out, and it took me 3 years to actually read the book. But when I got the book, I got interested in it, and that's what got me to read. I found a book of interest for me to read that got me into something. It takes something that makes you want to do something, to want to learn more, that just keeps you going. So that's what we do. And we're looking to continue building those mentorships, taking our students on more college tours. And I think that another challenge, just really quickly, is that students of color usually see Black men as just a dean, a coach, or a behavior specialist. We don't see ourselves as content teachers. And that's an issue in itself, because you have a Black man as an English teacher, a history teacher, a math teacher, and you're like, yo, I don't want to learn from this. Why are we doing this right now? I know decimals, but do you? Do you? Because if you did, you wouldn't have tested at the level that you did. But it takes a conversation with that student one-on-one to be like, yo, I'm actually disappointed in you, kid, because I know you can do the work, but I don't want you to fail yourself, because all this data is just showing me that you are where you're supposed to be. But I know you for a fact you read on the 9th grade level. But because you have testing anxiety and you don't know how to regulate yourself, you don't have any fidgets next to you, you don't have anything that you actually are advocating for, you feel as if you don't want to do it. So you just put your head down and you waste your entire time sleeping during a test. And then that test, then you're just clicking whatever just to get it over with. And that's where our students fall short on as well. So advocating for those accommodations, advocating for themselves, and Jacob's Puzzle is just looking to create those advocacy ways where students can actually have their own voice and their own learning, because it's so crucial. I could tell my mother wanted me to be an actuarial scientist. She wanted me to be a lot of different things that I didn't want to be. But it took me to actually realize, like, I want to do this. And that's what I did. And that's where I am today. Long story, version long.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm having goosebumps as you're speaking, right? Because everything you said, I've seen to be true. I was what they call a late bloomer. My son, wasn't born until I was 40. So I had a kind of a distance from the education system. And then all of a sudden I come into the education system as a mature adult. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? And what I begin to see is all of the stuff you say is what's happening. And as you speak it, I begin to see how important it is for somebody like you who gets it to be there to intercept not only the behavior, the lack of confidence, the systematic things that are happening. Because what I begin to realize, even in daycare, when you send your child off to these buildings and you have no idea what's going on in that building, there can be a lot of damaging things going on. I want you to hold tight, Brother Ashton. And what we're going to do is bring you back for some Q&A when we wrap up with Cheryl, and we're going to do some joint Q&A. So hold your questions tight, put them in the chat. Make sure you drop in the chat, Ashton, where people can contact you. Tamika also has that. She can drop it in the chat for you. But up next, we got Cheryl. What's up, Cheryl? How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you? I'm so glad to be here. And your story was just amazing, Austin. I was really feeling it. And I just wish we had more teachers like that. I wish all teachers were like that, because I think it would be a different system, So thank you for your work.
I mean, I was getting goosebumps. Sure, you do this work all the time. You probably like, yeah. Me, I'm like, I got to be honest with y'all. I pretty much gave up on teachers in the education system. I'm like, this thing is worse than corporate America. I'm like, they all the devil, right? I really got to that place. And y'all must understand, I'm a hopeless romantic. I love love, right? I love whatever. Like Brother Ashton, it's like, man, I like people, right? But when I began to see the foolishness, where I'm from, I give you 1,000 times, but as Tamika say on 1,001, I'm over. And I gave that education system 1,001 times. So I'm like, we gonna do this. But anyway,
and that's me, right? That's where I come in. I'm like the opposite. I'm not in the educational system, but I can relate to his story in many ways. I grew up with an IEP, right? So I remember what that was like to be pulled out, and people knowing that that's where I was going to be pulled out. And then when you're going to a predominantly white school, I'm originally from South Jersey, right outside of Philly, and attended a predominantly white school, but the community that was Black where I lived, they were all related to me, right? So that embarrassment, that stigma of being the Black girl in a predominantly white school or class that needs sped ed services. So, I experienced that, but I was lucky. I got good services, right? My parents were able to help supplement whatever the school was doing. I had tutors, things like that. So I was able to get what I needed, right, to go to college, right, to get a master's degree, to work. But in college, though, that's when my ADHD, which was there all along, but I think my learning disabilities were so severe, they focused on that. But the behavioral stuff, yeah, that really came out in college. Some of the executive functioning issues that you have when you're ADHD, I remember the one time that made me really, to this day, it sticks with me. And I was in a anatomy class of some sort. I was the only Black person in class. I went to Virginia Wesleyan. This is an undergrad. And I was zoned out a majority of the time because what she was saying just wasn't interesting and it didn't make sense. So then she talked about openings and how, like, anytime you have an opening on the body, mucus is formed. And I yelled out something so inappropriate because I wasn't paying attention. So just think about what I yelled out in the class, like, oh, does that include your, and I was like, said vagina. And of course, I got kicked out of the classroom. So, and this is in college. So like that kind of impulsivity, like not thinking, not that filter, not in any way trying to be rude or disrespectful, but I wasn't zoned in. And then she finally said something that kind of grabbed my attention. And then my mind connected it to something that helped me make sense of the topic, even though it may not have been appropriate in that situation. Right. So, that was the driving force, I think, of me really looking at the ADHD, the impulsivity, how I think, the connections I make and getting that out. Yeah, social clip.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's a new story. And I'm sitting
I know. That's
clutching my pearls because,
yeah.
Cheryl, nice to meet you again.
So, yeah. So, that experience. So the work, what do you want to know about me now? Because I told you.
Let's talk about advocating for kids, right? So what was your defining moment when you decided to, charter Advocating for Kids, Inc.?
Trauma. It was trauma for me. I had to develop this organization because I myself, like I said, I had a disability, right? But then, it's hereditary. A lot of these brain disorders are hereditary. So my children growing up had disabilities, and I was traumatized by the experience of trying to get appropriate services for my young Black male son, right? Who was on the spectrum and who needed speech therapy services. I was told that my child didn't need speech, or she wanted to discharge him for speech because she felt that I was speaking Black English to him at home and that he was confused when he came to school, and it had nothing to do with his autism. That ability to want to insult me like that, to say something that callous and not explain it. And then even when I expressed how I felt, that was rude, and it was taking everything in me not to jump across the table and choke her, because me and this white woman are in this room together, and I'm just thinking, can I get her? So after I got my babies fixed, like and not fixed, let me change that word. After I got my kids the services that they needed, right? I advocated, I learned everything I needed to learn. I think I filed 3 due processes. Can't tell you how many state complaints and OCR complaints I filed. I was at school board meetings. I was at PTA meetings. I just was, I had to do something, right? I could not let that go. And then after they got settled, I said, you know what? There's nobody out there at this time that looked like me that was doing this work. So even the advocates and the attorneys that I had to hire through some of these processes, they still didn't quite get it. Right. So that again, we go back to the idea of representation and how important that is in advocacy. And I said, I got to do something with the rest of this pain or trauma that I was experiencing based on trying to get my child services. So I decided to start the company Advocating for Kids. And I've been doing it for, my kids have graduated now. They succeeded, graduated, got, general education diplomas. One of them had honors. Both of them were able to go to college, one 4 years, one 2 years. So the advocacy, I know it works if you know the system, if you know the language, if you know how to maneuver around these folks, and use the rights that we don't even really pay attention to, right? First day of school, you get all this paperwork about all these different things, but there's important pieces of paperwork in there. You need to understand what those disciplinary rules are saying. Because if your child has a behavioral disability, like an ADHD or a little bit of ED, they're going to break that code of conduct. It's going to happen. But you got to understand what you can do to make sure that even though your child broke that code of conduct, that you have some protections around them so that they don't become a statistic and be pushed into the school to prison pipeline by getting expelled, excluded, restrained, all that. So,
I hadn't thought about it that, if you have a child with any form of uniqueness, they're going to break the policy or the rules or whatever. Now, sure, I didn't prepare you for this question, but I know you're ready for what. For the people out there listening, I know what y'all thinking. Y'all thinking 2025. Next week, we're going to be doing a new episode I'm calling Poetry and Politics. You know why? Because, politics has always been a hard topic. I never did politics, right? Because I love, right? But it's 2025. If you ain't political by now, then I don't know. Check and see if you're breathing. Check your pulse, right?
Yeah.
So, but we decided, Jay and I, is we're going to do an episode for State of Black Man called Poetry and Politics, where you can talk, and we're going to give you the mic as long as you speak your opinion in poetic form. So it's coming up next week. And the reason why I thought about that, Cheryl,
yes,
as we're preparing this piece, we begin to think about mental health and education and services being like almost a privilege for people in our community. But I remember sitting down with you earlier this year, and I'm like, Cheryl, what you going to do this year? It's like weird. What we going to do? We're going to go left. We're going to go right. and you told me something about special education and vulnerable populations. Cheryl, what's going on with you? What's going on with the education system? What's going on 2025 for our kids in advocacy? What keeps you up at night? What are you working on?
Well, it's amazing that you say that, and I'm gonna drop this link. I was featured in an article in Capital B, which is a Black online news outlet, and we talked about Trump's policies and how they are going to threaten Black students with disabilities. And I just posted it there for you guys. If you want to go check it out and read into it detail, you'll hear, my story. You'll hear some of the clients that I work with, what they're going through. You'll hear some national experts. And I think the speech pathologist, Ayana, I think she's in it and she's here too. We have to prepare ourselves. Parents need to really take stock, right? And say, all right, what's going to happen? Finding out as much information as possible. Please start going to your school board meetings. Please start having a voice. Find out a way. You got to find some community that is connecting you with information and resources about the changes that are coming. And the problem is they're coming so quickly that even those that are being told that they're responsible for implementing these changes are trying to catch up, right? They're being told that they have 14 days at times to change policies or get rid of DEI in education and submit supports to show that you're getting rid of all these things. So the problem becomes getting clear, accurate information about what is happening immediately. So one of the things that we know is anything that's DEI is going to be removed. And unfortunately, what people have failed to realize that equity inclusion means disabilities, right? That means people with disabilities. All of the programs that were federally funded, especially for our kids transitioning out of high school, and those kinds of services that you could get through, in here in Virginia, we call the Department of Services and Rehab. They provide job coaching for students with disabilities in the community. They help link resources to the parents. They do evaluations for vocational kinds of support. Those kinds of programs are in jeopardy. And we just need to be aware of what is in jeopardy. And then we need to have a voice because the states still have responsibilities. The federal U.S. Department of Education does fund a majority of IDEA, but it doesn't fully fund it. The states still have some responsibility in it, right? But some of these other programs, though, the state has power to ensure that they are still in place and that they are still servicing these children. Now, there are major lawsuits that I'm aware of that are being filed against, some of these orders and these actions that Donald Trump is taking. So that's good because that will slow down the processes that he's trying to do. I don't know if it'll stop it, but at least it'll slow it down. But parents just need to be aware, educate yourself wherever you can, go to school board meetings, go to city hall meetings, check out my Facebook page. I'm always posting information about what is happening. If there's opportunities for you to join organizations that are doing writing letters against any policies that you disagree with, join those organizations. But as it comes to your kids' services, at this point, they're still going to have to provide sped ed services. Like, it's not going to go away. Now, the issue is, what does that look like? Because one of the things that he is calling for, because right now, sped ed funding, it's not block money, it's dedicated money. The states, the federal government says, look, you implement these regulations, IDEA, then we're going to give you some money because of that. It goes to the states. The states actually sign a contract. They agree. We're going to implement these regulatory language. States then make the school districts do the same thing. You want this money, you're going to agree to provide this service. One of the things that Trump wants to do is make it a block grant. So that means there's no kind of responsibility once they get that money to make sure it gets to the kids. Right now, that money is attached to IDEA, meaning if you're going to take this money from us, you're going to provide sped ed services and it's going to be used for these students. This becomes a block grant, which is something he wants. They get way too much flexibility.
Yes. That reminds me of then money starts moving in special places and you can't track it and you can't figure out where it went. Thank you for hipping us to it. And we're going to bring back Ashton, but I got another question for you because I want to hear about some things that you're working on, where they can catch you, because I know you have your Tuesday live stream where y'all see yours truly. I'm trying to. But tell me this, because everything you just mentioned is new. It's on top of what has already been the problem. You hit me to this. When I first, got into this whole process, I'm like, hey, I have a son. Because I have a Black son. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to do the paperwork. But then I started seeing when I would say things like anxiety and I'd say things like whatever, I would get these blank stares. I'm like, what are these blank stares? Didn't they know I said there's a problem? We got it, whatever. And I get these blank stares. Sure, tell us about the history of how Black and brown students would not get the service historically, and that's before 2025. In short, what would the majority say when you try to make sure that a Black student get access to these services?
Depends who I'm even talking to, right? Because in some worlds, in some rooms, they're overrepresenting our Black students. They're like pushing them into sped ed classes, ED classes, things that aren't necessarily who the student is. Student might be dyslexic, can't read, but they're acting out. So you want to say, oh, you're ED, we're going to put you in an ED class. Kid continues to act out because you're not addressing the root of the issue. Behaviorist communication. You're not listening to the communication, what the kid's saying to you. And then the kid continues to be pushed into then an alternative school. And before you know it, they are in the school to prison pipeline. So you got that pipeline that does exist. But then you also have situations where kids are underrepresented in kinds of disabilities like dyslexia, dysgraphia, the specific learning kinds of disabilities, right? And it's hard getting those particular services too. So yeah, I lost.
You asked the question, and thank you. You kind of surprised with that. You say there's an overrepresentation in the places they don't need, in the harmful places, and the underrepresentation where they need it. But in short, you can't get the support and the help you need. So now on top of that, we got this new stuff. So tell us about your live stream. Tell us about where you're going to be, where they can follow you. And we're going to bring Brother Ashton back, and we're going to do some Q&A for the audience. Audience, I have my conversation, but that's just a warm-up. Now it's your turn to come off mute. I'm going to let you come off mute and ask questions to this audience, to the speakers. Let's see, you guys can unmute yourself now. So I'm going to send Brother Ashton. But before Ashton goes, sure, where can we follow you? Where can we support you?
Yeah.
And what do you want to share with the audience that I haven't asked you, I haven't talked?
I want to share that, yes, on Tuesdays, not next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, and she's here. Calvin, you and I will be interviewing Maria Davis Pierre, and we're going to be talking about mental health in autism, mental health for Black neurodivergent students. And we're also going to be talking about her conference, which I'll be presenting at in April, the Autism in Black Conference. I will be there live in Florida, presenting Saturday. I'm opening Saturday. I'm super excited for that. I'm going to see Angela Davis March 20th through, and I submitted questions, so I'm hoping I get to go on the stage to see her. She's my hero. And then we are also doing a follow-up with a behavioral specialist, and I think she was here too, Miss Green. She's going to be talking about ABA in the Black community. So I just have lots and lots of great opportunities for you guys, opportunities to learn so much. And I did drop my link in there and my Facebook page, my Instagram, so you can check me out there.
Yes, make sure, yes. Maria, drop in the chat where they can check out your conference that's coming up in April for Autism in Black. So this is a great opportunity.
Austin, guess what? Austin is doing the men's. Look,
Yes.
You're going to get away with it.
So, no.
In the beginning.
It's funny. I was actually going to say when you said, I was like, yo, yeah. So, yes. Now, notice, I am going to say it. You notice how people say Austin and not Ashton?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's okay. I'm just no, bro. I'm just teasing. No, it's fine. I'm so teasing.
Girl, she will give you a new name.
I know it's not a love.
It's like virgins, and I'm like looking at Ashton and Ashton, but yeah.
No, it's all good. I love it though. So
some questions from the audience. Let's see. I know you guys are thinking, let me give you guys what to expect. Thank you, Maria, for putting that in the chat. This is a great opportunity to get plugged in. As you guys may see, what we're going through is by design. My hope is that we go from being reactive to proactive. Y'all, they plan in your face. It's by design. They set these things up, and all of a sudden we're like, whoa, what happened? So it comes a time where if you're reacting, then we're already a little too late. We got to get ahead of the game. We got to know the hand before it even plays. But it's going to take some thought to get there. Let's go to questions. Let's go to the audience. I allowed you to unmute yourself. We got Sean, brother Sean on. You can raise your hand, unmute yourself. If you raise your hand, unmute yourself, I'll be able to see you on.
Am I muted?
Go ahead, Sean. Your question.
How are you doing this evening? This is my first episode, and this has been amazing. I feel super seen, heard. Every single piece of communication was clean, clear, and precise, and it hit right home. I am South African, so living in Florida and kind of the transition of when all the trauma and the neurodivergence really happened was when I was 25. But up until then, I had basically lived Ashton's story of being able to do incredible feats of academia in school, and then also just sometimes not do a complete science project and not know how we got here. I spent the whole summer vacation with this project. It was beautiful. Let me just, quick story. It was a solar stove, just putting foil on some cardboard and setting it up so that it captured the sun. Didn't do it. It was my favorite project. But like Ashton, there was an American examination that came to my school in the 5th grade, and I was awarded. I was called on stage, and I was like, this doesn't happen often, because I was given like everyone was surprised because I scored in the top 10% and blew everyone out of the water, blew everyone out in culinary school, so much so that I was afforded opportunities to come to the United States. That didn't happen by accident, but the behavioral stuff and also understanding what you're going through, that literally only kicked in the past 13 months, and it completely changed my life. So thank y'all for being a community that has kind of caught me right when I needed to be caught, right when I'm starting my own media company so that I can participate in this, because I'm not participating in whatever they got going on. I come from a country that stopped that. We're not doing that.
Yes.
No, we're just not doing that. So thank you very much for having me.
Keep going. I got excited, man. I was getting ready to do an amen. I was just preaching to some homeboys recently. I'm like, don't y'all know the history of South Africa? And they try to bring them people over here. What you think they gonna do when they get over here? And I ain't talking about the black ones. I'm talking about the other ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've been, anyway, I digress. But
that whole concept, the entire concept makes no sense. And again, I was a child who at every single point in my life, if I asked you a question and the answer made no sense, the frustration would tip me over. So I recently learned in Sunday school, in Bible study, there was that the word to sieve is to boil. So that's why when you're sieving, you're boiling over, because this doesn't make sense. Why am I asking you a question and you're not giving me an answer? You're not answering this question correctly. None of this makes sense. And so it's to have people explain bigotry and then look you in your face and ask. I was bartending yesterday and 4 people asked me, so what do you think of Louisiana? And I said, I don't have an opinion about Louisiana, but they all said it's dirty. Just went straight to being derogatory. And I was like, this really is an opinion. And y'all are just having it in front of me. And I was like, okay, cool. I walked away slightly and just, endured and ended the night calmly, because it's not today that I'm going to have the fight, but that we're not doing that again.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your journey. Definitely connect with the people who have shared in the chat, because what I've learned is that there's safe spaces out here. And as Brother Ashton has found, we have to find community, people who see us, people who understand us. And as I was talking to a therapist recently, they said, it's funny about neurodivergent people. We tend to find each other, be like, I like the way he talked. Other people don't like the way I talk, right? But, other people like, I like the way he got a little whatever, right? And I think that is so, so, so beautiful. So thank you, Brother Sean, for being here. Let's go some more questions. What questions do we have for Cheryl? What questions do you have for Ashley? Y'all be careful what y'all ask them. Y'all know Cheryl. She gonna give it to you. She gonna answer your question. So it's time, but I trust these people because they're quite awesome. And sure, I want to connect you with Ashton and Ashton connect you with Maria and Cheryl, because community is important and we have to do the work, because being reactive to people who've been planning this stuff for 20 years, that ain't sufficient. It ain't sufficient for these things to be a privilege. It ain't sufficient for they to be the first world problems. They not, because I guarantee you those other people are plotting and scheming 20 years in advance. We got to get a hold of what's going on. What questions do we have from the audience?
This year, though, I feel like right here today, we really are connecting. That's right. Maria said we are connecting already, if you think about it, because you have Autism in Black, right? That's here. And we're both presenters at part of the one they're doing for the men, the one for the conference. And Calvin, you're the DJ.
Yes.
Yeah.
We really are making these kinds of connections. And I didn't even realize that you were going to be doing the men's event until someone said that. So it is happening organically, which I think is powerful. That means there are opportunities for us to develop our collective around this.
Yes, indeed. And I love it. I love what Maria's doing with Autism in Black. And I tell you why. Is because, I was, at my therapist and I was talking about, I'm like, hey, this Autism in Black, and it's going to be this conference, it's going to be this thing. And the therapist, she's PhD, but she's like, I'm so, so glad that you're finding community. And I love it, because the people who have the visionaries to realize, no, this is important. Some people, they don't recognize a body of knowledge. They don't recognize best practices. They don't recognize that you can't be out here by yourself, being too proud and too whatever. No, that's a trick. No, that's a foolish. No. You got to find community. Go ahead, Ashton. You was getting ready to say something.
No, I was going to say, you called me because I had the thought, but I was gonna say, like, it is happening organically, and I love it, because it took me. I found Autism Black through social media, because I was looking at Autism Speaks, and I was like, there should be definitely an organization that actually works with Black and brown students, that, like, there are families that go through this that aren't alone. Yet somehow I know there's a community out there. I know there's people out there that understand it, that aren't just of the other persuasion. And I really enjoy the fact that I've actually really been learning to build my community, because you said neurodivergents feed off each other, and we definitely do. It really just happens organically, and it's so fun when you actually observe it. When I observe it in my students, I'm like, y'all really shouldn't be around each other, because y'all don't know how to handle each other. And you bounce off the wall. And I have actually two students that one has autism, one has ADHD, and those two together, it's like their conversations just go from one way to another, and then it's like, I don't like you. I don't like you either. All right, cool. So we going to lunch? Yeah. So it's like it's such an interesting experience to really see them really like partner and grow. So like, I'm loving this community, and it took me a while to find this community. It took me so long to really understand that, people joke and say, oh, it's my ADHD. Oh, we all have autism. We're all on the spectrum. But are you really on the spectrum? Are you really autistic? Do you really have ADHD? Do you really have post-traumatic stress disorder? Do you really have a brain? And like, those things are hard to talk about, because people want to feel so special. But there are things that are about people that are neurodivergent that make them unique, that people tend to overlook because they aren't the same. They can't think the same. They can't pronounce or socialize the same. But when you are able to really when you're really able to accept people for where they are and who they are, and just accept that fact that they might process differently than what you are. Some people process audibly. Like, I myself process audibly. I need to think as I process it. Some people process as they're writing. Some people process as they're like talking with their friends. I am definitely like, I can see myself doing those things. So it's like, let's build community with one another. Let's find people that look like me, that talk like me, that can understand it. And I'm so grateful that Maria is here as well. I'm so grateful that Cheryl is here, because it's really showing a testament that we as neurodivergent Black people are very much so present. We're not just a statistic for a data point. I'm literally a wealth of knowledge. And the resources that I have, the resources that Cheryl has, the connections that we all have, expound well beyond our just, oh, you talk a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I know for something I know I speak a lot. I know I speak very fast. I know I speak a lot. I can go on and on and on. It doesn't stop until someone stops me. But even still, you have people that understand that want to hear that want to hear your story, that want to understand that I'm not alone. And it took me profound, gentlemen. It took me a lot to really understand, like, I need other Black men. I need other Black communities to be a part of, to understand that I am unique.
Yes, indeed. And Leah, if you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself. I just muted you because of the noise. Thank you for sharing that. Talking about community, and you talk about people who want to, like, nowadays feel like everybody want to be neurodivergent. I'm like, no. I have I said,
Nah.
let me tell you, I was talking to a friend, and she cool people, right? But she come from a different place, right? And so she Jewish, but she votes different than her mom. I'm just gonna leave it there. So she was going through this thing. She was getting ready to lose a job, because I can tell, the 30-day, 90-day notice was coming. And as she was talking, I said, should I tell her or should I keep it to myself? And when I began to think, I said, you know what? As neurodivergent people, especially ones with ADHD and autism, you ADHD and autism when you didn't went through a few of those 90-day notices and you're about to be fired again. You'd be like, wait a minute, I'm getting fired again. Trust me. When your neurodivergence is getting you fired and you finally wake up, you're like, dang, like Cheryl said, she got kicked out of, it's the impulsive, it's whatever. It ain't hip. It ain't cool. Trust me, we ain't trying to be cool, but you begin to know yourself and see yourself. And it's something about that and finding community. So I said, you know what? We just going to have to get together, be like, hey, we just got to keep our resume updated, because it is what it is. Anyway, Leah, let us know if you had a question. I just want to say thank you, guys.
I love it.
She said she basically before she gets the notice.
Once you get the notices, hey, so y'all know how it works, right? And it's important to know that, because if you don't, you'd be like, well, I don't understand why I keep getting fired, man. I'm not good enough. I'm like, you got to realize sometimes you're too smart for other people, right? And they don't know what that means. Yeah, if you start talk about it, and they're going to be like offended, they're going to be in their feeling, but you think you better than me?
Yep.
About you? We ain't thinking about you, right? Literally, we ain't thinking about you. So anyway, so sorry.
Also, protect yourself, though, as an employee. If you are able to get a form that from your PCP that says you do have a documented disability, and you say that, especially your application saying that I do have a disability, and then they try to fire you for it, that's a legal thing. And, most companies don't want to be illegal arguments for discrimination.
Yes.
Probably neurodivergence.
Yes.
That was just a gem, just to drop, just in case.
So
people love to say that, oh, you talk too much, or oh, you're just straightforward, or your actions are very blunt. Well, because you asked me a crazy question, so I'm going to give you a very direct answer. I'm sorry, not sorry, but I'm sorry. Love you, though, with all the love, but
it's nothing like the crazy question where you have to pause, and when you pause, you got some awareness, right? You're like, wait a minute, I paused, right? So that means I didn't say what I was getting ready to say. Anyway, let me tell you guys what's coming up next. Seems like y'all gonna be quiet tonight. Y'all not gonna ask questions, but let me just give my thanks and give you guys let you know what's coming up next. Next week, we're going to be doing State of Black Man. It's a podcast I kicked off with Brother Chris. And essentially what we do is talk about Black male topics. And next week, we'll have a special episode of politics and poetry. And that's an opportunity for you to speak, but it must be in poetic form. Why? We struggle to share our opinion without disagreeing, without disrespecting, without yelling, without cursing. I ain't talking about y'all, because y'all the good behaved people. I'm talking about my cousins, right? But I love this whole thing. And Jay and Ari Warman, she's like, Calvin, some people gonna try to break the rules, and they're gonna try to say they're gonna do a poem, but then they're gonna try to preach. Well, I got the mute button ready. Anyway, I'm excited because I'm gonna be debuting my first poetic piece, right? because I had a lot on my mind because, I get to texting sometimes and all of a sudden, my best words come out when I'm like, I can't believe, right? And I start texting. Yeah, I didn't converted that to, some poetic speak. So come back next week, and then I don't know what we're doing after that. You have to stay on the text message alerts, email alerts, join our community at soulthursday.com. I want to say thank you, Brother Ashton, for sharing your story. It has been so, I don't know what to call it, man, but I'm just appreciative right now that a brother like you is in the classroom watching our teachers, because whenever my son go to a school, I try to find people like you. I'm saying we got to find the brother like Ashton, because what happens is he going to keep a watch. And I get to know him. I say, hey, my son is down the hall in that crazy teacher class. Can you keep an eye on him? He said, I got you. You see what I'm trying to say? We need people like him to keep eyes on our children, because we don't know what's going on in that classroom. And Cheryl, my sister from another mother, Cheryl, we starting to look alike a little bit, girl, maybe cousins. But anyway, thank you for hanging out with me at Soul Thursday. It is always a blessing because, I can't curse like I used to, but it's always good to know that Cheryl's like, well, Calvin, you want me to curse how many times? And she will ask you. She's like, Calvin, I cuss 7 times. You want 7 times, 9 times? I'm like, Cheryl.
All tonight. I didn't even say vagina.
I'm just going, I ain't got no time. I love your passion. I love your work. And I always tell people, if them school teachers in Georgia start acting crazy, they realize I got Cheryl on the speed dial because she going to make everybody miserable. I'm like, y'all should have been doing what y'all supposed to do. Y'all did this. Y'all made me call Cheryl. So thank you for being here. Looking forward. Y'all can catch me on Tuesdays at Cheryl's live stream. Cheryl, do you have the link to your next live stream?
I don't have the link up. I'm sorry. I will have it tomorrow. We won't have one next week because I'll be out of town. So it's the first Tuesday, the first Wednesday of March, second Wednesday of March.
Yeah.
It's Maria. She's doing it.
Yeah, we're going to be doing Maria Davis.
And yeah, Calvin, if I give you the link,
yeah, just whenever you have it, get it.
Get that and you can share it with your community. We would love to have you.
Yes, and this is where you can get plugged in. So Brother Ashton, share with your people so they can be plugged in. We must have community. So y'all know how I do. I got to play some of my daddy's favorite records as I begin to, just really relax a little bit from this because I get so excited. I love what Brother Ashton says is that when we get together, we get so excited. True story. I did my first, maybe not the first, but my first, really, really exciting show on Neurodivergent. It was ADHD in Black women. And we must have had 200, 300, 400 people in the thing. And man, we were doing trivia and it would be like 100 responses. And it's like, we couldn't wait to turn up. We were so excited. Well, this person I was training as a co-host at the time, she's like, I just feel like we need to do some breathing exercise. We need to calm down. I'm like, girl, we're having fun. You know what I mean? We turn it up because we were in community. We had found each other. We were all, just enjoying the moment. So thank you guys for being here. And I want to thank you for letting me be myself. And thank you for hanging out at Soul Thursday. Look forward to talking to you guys soon. You can join us on a text message. You can join us if you just go to soulthursdays.com /register. You can sign up for email blast or text message just so you don't have to remember. Look forward to seeing you guys soon and be talking to you soon. Hang out for 5 or 10 minutes if you want to hear me play some of my daddy's favorite records. Thank you guys for hanging out at Soul Thursdays.
I told my frozen sleep out bad, it's been bad midnight. It's just like an ocean, morning to the it's getting closer. Keep the few eggs cool with you. Sometimes it's hard. Feel one and that's in roots and feel one.